Good afternoon and welcome. We're glad to have you with us today. We're live on Zoom and streaming to YouTube. In just a minute, I'll introduce our guest, Mandisa Thomas. Before we begin, I want to remind you of about our Zoom events. You can join us on Zoom. Some of you are on YouTube and we're glad to have you, but if you want to join us on Zoom so you can interact with us live, to get that login info, go to our meetup group at meetup.com/CFL Join us there and look for more events to be announced soon. We've taken what was a monthly in-person educational event and made it into a bi-weekly online event with amazing people from around the United States. This week is no different. All these people have things to share that are of interest to you, including in 2 weeks, we have something a little different for you. Paul Halpern, a seasoned author and professor of physics at the University of Sciences in Philadelphia, will talk about his recent book, Synchronicity, the epic quest to understand the quantum nature of cause and effect. In the book, which is part narrative and part science, Paul tells the story of the unlikely friendship between psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung and the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Wolfgang Pauli. So I know those are some names that many of you are familiar with, hopefully all of you. If not, we're looking forward to learning more about that on September 6th at 3 p.m. So same time, same place. We'll continue to stream these as YouTube events as well. And you can follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/CFL Of course, our weekly social events called Free Thought Cafes, as well as our secular women events online, will help you keep connected with the free thinkers you know in Central Florida and beyond. We're fortunate to have people that are snowbirds out of the state or folks that come and go, and other people around Florida are joining us. So it's been really great. Again, you'll find all that with Zoom links on our meetup group at meetup.com/CFL And you can also find us on Facebook as well at CFL Free Thought, but you need to join the meetup to get those Zoom logins. So Facebook is great, but we don't have the Zoom information out there publicly. If you're with us on the Zoom call today, please feel free to turn on your camera if you like. I'm not sure if Jocelyn's managed that, but just as long as you stay on mute, that will be great. We don't want to distract from the conversation, at least not until we get to the end of the call. Those of you in the Zoom meeting can find the chat option available at the bottom of your screen on your computer. If you're on a mobile device or tablet, just tap the screen and that chat option should appear. And that's where we want you to ask questions today. We don't have the Q&A panel that we do in webinar, but in Zoom meeting, we'll use the chat panel to ask those questions. And you can direct those to me or you can direct those to everyone. And if you want to make sure you catch our attention, put the word question in front of it and that'll make it easy. Depends on how busy the chat is as to how useful that trick is going to be. And with that, I'll introduce today's guest. Mandisa Thomas is one of this movement's pioneers. She is the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers, a 501c3 organization out of Atlanta, which connects Blacks and their allies who are living free of religion. As with many other similar and national organizations, the group engages in social, educational, volunteer, and activist efforts. They support the growth of more than a dozen Black Nonbelievers organizations, including one right here in Central Florida, the Black Nonbelievers of Orlando, and our own Barbara Page is the organizer of that meetup group. In her work to grow the national organization and the visibility of its members, Mandisa has made appearances on CBS's Sunday Morning and on CNN. She's interviewed with and been featured in Playboy and Jet magazines, and she was featured alongside 4 other Black women beyond belief in the American Humanist's own magazine, The Humanist. Mandisa was the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association's 2018 Person of the Year, and in 2019, she earned the Secular Student Alliance's Backbone Award, as well as the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Free Thought Heroine. Here in Central Florida, we've had the great pleasure of seeing Mandisa several times in the past few years for social visits, as well as educational opportunities and panel discussions. Mandisa is here today to talk about Women of Color Beyond Belief, a relatively new addition to the national conference lineup. So thanks for being with us, Mandisa, today, and welcome.
Hello, David, and everyone who is joining us this afternoon. Thank you once again for having me. It is a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, especially during this crazy year that has given us this opportunity to connect us even more and to engage more, not just in your local areas, but across the country. And it is an honor to be a part of this movement and, continue to do this work that is so necessary within our respective communities. Yes, as David said, my talk is going to be on Women of Color Beyond Belief, both the conference that was first held last year and also within the secular movement. If you've been involved in this movement for a very long time in this community, most of the events and most of the leadership tend to be still predominantly white, but that landscape is changing, and especially with the help of organizations like Black Nonbelievers, we are helping to bring that about and also amplify the voices of change amongst our demographics. And so I'm going to share my screen because I have a short presentation for you because I like to share visuals. Many of you I have met in person. Like David said, I have traveled to the Orlando area a number of times. And, I really, really enjoy actually engaging and meeting people in person because that's really where we get a sense of how the work is being done. Of course, I know many of us cannot wait until we can do that again, but it is nice for us to at least share what we've been doing for those who didn't know, so that we will be more excited in the future about, these opportunities. The title of this talk is called Women of Color Beyond Belief. Where do we go from here? And you see the nice logo, the emblem for Women of Color Beyond Belief. And I know you can't really see the shirt that I have on, but it is one of the conference organizers' shirts. It has my name on it. It was slightly different from the conference shirts, but when you organize stuff, you get to be a little special. So getting into a little about me, for those of you who don't know, David gave a nice introduction, but I'm just going to give just a bit more on myself. I am a New York City native, born and raised, moved to the Atlanta, Georgia area at the end of 1997. When my daughter was 3 weeks old, my husband and I moved down here to start our life here in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and we have been here ever since. My own upbringing was pretty secular. And even in a city like New York, it's still very rare because even though it is very diverse culturally, um, there is no escaping, especially the Black church. So, and I do have family members who are still very religious, but I was born at a time where there was a shift in cultural identity. And so I was raised learning about Black history and culture. I also learned early on about how Christianity was imposed on the Black community, not just imposed but forced on the African captives and the enslaved, and how that has generated, some institutional factors that come into why the Black community is still so highly religious, among others. Yes, I am the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers, which started locally in the Atlanta area in 2011 as Black Nonbelievers of Atlanta. We expanded our scope later on that year because of interest in starting similar groups, and the first affiliate was the Orlando area. In 2018, I transitioned to full-time activism. At the time that Black Nonbelievers was started, I was working a full-time job as a contractor at the Centers for Disease Control. As the demands on my time and work increased in the movement, in the secular community, it was time to make a choice. And ever since, I feel like I've made the right choice in taking on activism full time and running the organization. So I'm very much excited about that decision that I made 2 years ago. In addition to running Black Nonbelievers, I also currently serve on the boards of both the American Humanist Association and American Atheists. I previously served on the boards for Foundation Beyond Belief, the Secular Coalition for America, and the 2016 Reason Rally Coalition. And David already mentioned the awards that I received last year and in 2018. I am slated to receive the Irving and Annabelle Wolfson Award, which is presented by the UU congregation in Worcester, Massachusetts. That was supposed to take place this year, but of course, due to the current circumstances, we had to kind of push that back to next year. So I hope that I'll be able to share information about when that takes place. And if there's an opportunity for it to be streamed electronically, I'll be sure to let everyone know. So for Black nonbelievers, we are very event-based. We do meet a lot in person. We do engage socially. We do engage in advocacy. We do engage and we try to be as visible as possible. But over the course of our existence, which will be 10 years next year, we've had the opportunity to produce some major events and initiatives. And so the first was the Reason Rally After Party in 2012, which featured Graydon Square. We also co-produced the Blackout Secular Rally along with Black Atheists of America, which was another active organization at the time. In 2016, we hosted our 5th anniversary celebration in Atlanta, which featured actually your previous guest, Daryl Ray, who is one of my favorite people in the whole world. I do volunteer. I'm a longtime volunteer with Recovering from Religion. I do facilitate a local meetup in the Atlanta area. Of course, that's been a hiatus at the moment in person, but I still, I still volunteer. In 2017, we launched the Being Changes Lives campaign, which features testimonies from members and allies about leaving religion and how they found Black nonbelievers and how their lives have changed. And in some cases, some members have expressed that their lives have been saved. Uh, we've also done our cruise convention now titled BNCCon in 2017 to the present. We're still waiting on, we have a smaller group this year, of course, circumstances pending. We're all trying to remain as safe as possible, but those have become, I know the Central Florida Free Thought community does a similar event annually, and I know that you guys have rescheduled as well. But it has proven to be a very worthwhile event to embark on because you engage so many different people on a ship and you also can commune and fellowship with like-minded people, and being in that space for a certain amount of time does give you the opportunity to learn more about each other, which is great. And this year, we launched our True Liberation Billboard campaign, which was co-sponsored by the Stifel Free Thought Foundation in the wake of our Black family discussion that took place on July 16th. And if you follow me on social media, if you follow Black nonbelievers on social media, you would have seen these 2 images that state, "Free yourself from religion and find true liberation." Now, those billboards are currently up in the Atlanta area. One is by the Interstate 75 and 85 North going towards Atlanta. The other one is by Piedmont Hospital. Both of the images starting tomorrow will be displayed at the Piedmont Hospital location. And we've also now turned them into bumper stickers. So I will give you information on where you can find those later on in this talk. But um, you can, if you're in the Atlanta area, you will see those billboards rotating at that area. And it is a way for us to, in the wake of everything that is taking place with the latest round of Black Lives Matter protests and calls for images that need to be changed and institutions that need to be challenged, we challenge that many people also need to look at Christianity as being the most binding and liberate themselves from it. And there will be more information on how to support that campaign later on in this presentation as well. So now we get to why we're here. We're talking about the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference, which was presented by Black Nonbelievers, also Black Skeptics Los Angeles, and the Women's Leadership Project, which is headed by Sakibu Hutchinson, who was a speaker at last year's Free Flow Conference. It took place from October 4th through the 6th in Chicago. And it was the first ever event to feature all women of color, atheists, humanists, freethinkers, skeptics, secularists, etc. Now, some of you may think, wow, that might have been a short conference, right? Because you don't see as many women of color that are featured at most of your secular events. However, I am proud to say that in my journey and in my travels and in engagement with the broader secular community, I have come across a number and actually also helped to cultivate the work of women of color who are working in this movement and who don't get the acknowledgement and credit they deserve. So the purpose of this was to bring those voices together more and so that more people can see the work that they do. But the premise for this was, as David mentioned previously, the July-August 2018 issue of the Humanist magazine. Now, as you can see over here in the corner, some of you, if you are members of the American Humanist Association and you subscribe to the Humanist magazine, you would have received your hard copy of this issue. And there was a cover story on us. And so after this issue debuted, myself, Sakivu, and Bridget Crutchfield, who was also a speaker at the Free Flow conference in 2013. We had a talk, and due to our previous events that we had done separately, I know that Black Nonbelievers had featured Dr. Hutchinson at an event back in Atlanta back in 2013. But in our respective works, we decided that it was time for us to put this conference together. Between all of us and our work and our engagement with the community, as well as the other women of color that we worked with, we decided that it was time for us to put this together. And in my previous work of me being an event services manager, which is one of the reasons why Black Nonbelievers is so event-based. It is a part of my skill set and expertise. And I know I've presented with CFFC before about how to plan a successful event. So it was time for us to put this together. And as you can see here, this is one of the pictures from the conference on the red carpet with all of the 5 fierce humanists together in the same space. And so it was good for people not to just see us on the cover of the magazine, but that you see us exist also in person and that we were coming together. So the goals for the conference were to highlight the perspectives and work of women of color in the secular community, because though it may not seem like it's a lot, it actually really is, and there's more to come. And who better than to feature that than women of color who are working in this movement? It was also to increase the visibility and opportunities for women of color in the secular community. There's a lot of talk of diversity and inclusion within this community, and there is still something lacking when it comes to leadership. And so when events like this provide an opportunity for others, whether it's attendees or other organizers or other sponsors or supporters, to see the women of color who are doing this work and to also get to know them better and perhaps invite them to be a part of your organization at some point if they aren't already. And also to encourage future support for these women, us women, and the organizations that are facilitated by POC or people of color, IEBN, and others who support people of color within these organizations. So some of the women of color some of the women who were featured didn't necessarily come directly from Black Nonbelievers or Black Skeptics, even though we're heavily affiliated. There were some who were organizers with the Secular Student Alliance and other organizations. And so part of our work is featuring those people who work within those organizations and also establishing and cultivating collaborative efforts, because this is a part of what we do. And so some of the topics of discussion at Women of Color Beyond Belief, the inaugural event, in addition to church-state separation and coming out as an atheist, we also discussed criminal justice and reform, end-of-life preparation, intersectional feminism, relevancy of the secular movement to women of color, secular organizing, parenting, and also we discussed being queer and sexual identity as a queer and being disabled, and also surviving domestic abuse, because these are often topics that aren't covered at your average conference, but as they affect women in particular, especially women of color. It was important for us to discuss these topics, and also from the people who are living them and who work in those areas, so that you hear exactly what their perspectives are, and they're not coming from the what is considered the norm, what is considered the normal perspective. And so you got to hear from those women who are speaking directly to their work and to those experiences, which is extremely important. In addition to the conference, which I will say at this point before I get into the service project, most of the conferences, there's a separate fee for your admission. Then you may have to factor in, you may have to pay for food separately. There's usually a separately ticketed dinner event, reception event, and other satellite events. What I'm proud of about Women of Color Beyond Belief was that for the conference admission itself, even if you did not purchase the satellite events, breakfast, lunch, and breaks were included in that pack in the admission. And the reason for that is because we wanted it to be a one-stop shop. We didn't want people to have to, break and not that there weren't food options there, but we wanted to have people to have as much time together and to converse and convene, but also that they didn't have to worry about purchasing food outside of the conference itself. And I think that there's something to be said about maybe having moms who are organizing this stuff, because we tend to think about that. But and we had full breakfast, we had nice lunch and breaks and such. So that was also another perk of being a part of the conference. Of course, we had a bundle ticket which included both the opening reception as well as the red carpet divas ball, which was more than just a dinner. But that was the Saturday night event. So we did have we had a bundle for that, but the conference admission itself did include food, so that people didn't have to worry about having to go too far and pay extra money to buy breakfast or lunch on their own. We also offered payment options, payment plans for those who, because just like everything else, conference admissions have to be budgeted out. And we wanted to take that into consideration for the people who wanted to attend, but may not have been able to pay the ticket outright. So we offered payment plans for people who wanted to, sort of pay in increments, which should be fine. But in addition to that, we also did the Secure the Bag service project. Now, if you've been following certain conferences like the American Atheist Conference for the past few years, you know that they've started incorporating a meal packing. They've started incorporating packaging meals to service the local areas for people or families who may need them. And so this particular project was spearheaded by Foundation Beyond Belief. Now, we did take a cue from some organizers who did bring this to the American Atheist Convention, as well as some others. And we packed thousands of meals to benefit marginalized communities, primarily people of color, in the Chicago area. And the best part about it was that conference participation was not required, even though it was preferred. So even if you just showed up on that day, on that afternoon that the official conference ended and wanted to help us with this project, you had the opportunity to do so. and all of the equipment was provided. It was a fun time. You know, we really got it in such a short period of time, but it was great to do, and it was really great to know that in addition to sitting there and learning and socializing, that we were actually doing something additionally good for the surrounding community. And so some of the sponsors, which also helped keep our costs a bit low, you may belong to one of your favorite national organizations here, like the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which was our legendary sponsor for this event. I just mentioned Foundation Beyond Belief, American Atheists, Compassion and Choices, Secular Student Alliance, Secular Women, and much, much more. All of the organizations of which which we have come to engage and get to know over these past few years did contribute and offer their support for this event because they saw its importance just like we did. And so it was great to have them on board to support this major event. And very, very happy that they got a chance to really, really learn from the women who were there, from the attendees who were there. I mean, it really, really was an amazing event, and I'm not exaggerating. So for Women of Color Beyond Belief, we were going to host it this year. However, due to the current circumstances, we have postponed it till 2021. So it will take place once again in Chicago from September 24th through the 26th. And it will be at the same hotel where we held it last time, which was the Marriott Chicago Midway. And as you can see here, the full admission, which we actually lowered from last year, will be $150, and that will be the price for the entire year. We also have student rates available. We will have childcare options like we did the first time, also payment plan options, and also sponsorship opportunities once again. So if you are the head of an organization and if you would like to see our sponsorship options, you may do so on our website. We had an amazing program that we put together with advertising, and those who sponsored the event in various ways. Shout out to Phil Ferguson. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, I think y'all may be. He was also one of our sponsors. He did a matching sponsorship. So it was amazing to see how many people came together to help us put this event on. And so some of the speakers here, you may recognize some of them, including Candace Gorham, who was one of the 5 Fierce Humanists on the cover. She will be back again. For those of you who aren't familiar with her, she is the author of the Ebony Exodus Project, Why Some Black Women Are Leaving Religion and Others Should Too. So we will once again have a variety of speakers, activists, organizers, authors, and those women who you may not have heard of, but that you should know of. And this is a part of what we do. So answering a burning question, can anyone attend? Yes. However, there are some notable exceptions. Anyone who intends to derail the conference focus, believers and non-believers alike. Now I'm going to explain what I mean by that for just a moment. You know, there are some people we've had questions about, well, I am of a certain persuasion, you know, I am white or I am male. Can I attend this conference? And the answer to that is yes. However, if you choose to center those identities over the women of color who already are marginalized and who already don't have that exposure and who already deal with experiences with, you know, who already had some challenging experiences with people in this movement, this is not the place to center either your whiteness or your male identity or what have you. So the mission is to get as many people to come as possible, to learn, to engage and support. So of course, you know, anyone can attend if they are interested. Just because it says Women of Color Beyond Belief does not mean that those are the only ones who should attend. However, when I get to the end, you'll see some remarkable photos that shows that there is a difference in who puts these events together. I promise you. Do we still need support? Yes. And so for those of you who organize conferences, I know David and Jocelyn do, y'all organize Free Flow. Y'all know how costly these events can get. And there's often costs that are associated once the events are concluded. And there's definitely a lot of costs that are involved when putting them together. And we want to make sure that we have an event that is bigger and better than ever in 2021. I mean, we had a wonderful conference the first time, and we want to make sure that we have an even better one next year. And so, do we still need support for this? Yes, we do. And you may visit wocbeyondbelief.com for more information on how to offer a general donation or to sponsor or even to purchase your admission. And you may also visit Black Nonbelievers for support of any kind to continue our work here. So in conclusion about where to go from here. Now, these are the pictures that I was telling you about. Now, these are some of the photos of the shirts that you see here. And it does make a difference as we are in the year of 2020, which has been very, very interesting to say the least. We are talking about people who are very much affected by this pandemic in a number of ways. The most vulnerable are Black women and women of color and people of color who are primarily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also still affected by another pandemic, which is one still of racism and injustice, and we are still fighting against that. And as a secular community, we have the opportunity to set an example here. We have an opportunity to come together and not be so blinded by our fight against church-state separation or state-church separation, and understand that issues that pertain to racial injustice, economic injustice, reproductive justice, and how they impact Black communities, how they impact Latinx communities, how they impact other communities of color, especially women, are extremely important. This work is more intersectional than we realize, and that we can incorporate our humanist values more than we think. And it isn't like we are just sitting back and waiting for this to happen. We have taken the bulls by the horn, so to speak. I apologize if that offends anyone, but figure of speech. But as the calls for diversity and inclusion come, as you can see from these pictures, again, when an organization like Black Nonbelievers puts on an event, you better believe that we are going to center the voices of who we represent. And it does make a difference. You will see more people of color at our events. You will see more Black folks. You will see more Black women, because we are doing this work. There are women of color, there are people of color who are doing this work. We are pretty much doing not just the same, but sometimes better work than some of the other people in this movement. And again, that doesn't negate the work that they do, but guess what? We are doing it too. And it's important that as our voices continue to grow, as more people come out of their religious beliefs and they are finding no spaces to land, they are finding our organizations, it is important for us to stand by each other and support, especially us women of color, those women of color who are not just sitting back and waiting for things to change. We are actually going about and making those changes, even if it is just bringing those voices together. Because if you had to have been there to experience such a monumental event, it was one like no other. because and there was power in that room. There was affirmation in that room. There was support in that room. Everyone felt it, no matter who was there. And these are how all of our spaces should be. All of our spaces should be affirming of everyone's position and also touching on areas of our lives and our work, and that people can see that we understand what they're going through, not just in our leaving God and religion behind, but also how we are affected by these other societal factors. And I'll tell you that it does make a difference, not just who puts it on, but also the support we get, the understanding that we get, and also how we come together to bring it all about. And the future, while right now seems a bit uncertain, we certainly don't walk by faith, right? Our slogan is walking by sight, not faith. We are trying to follow the evidence and trying to comply and adhere to the guidelines, especially with this pandemic. But we must also still be paying attention to the changing landscape in this movement, and also be prepared to offer that and provide that support that is needed, not just for the people coming out, but also those who may want to get involved and to also stay involved in this community, because we really are a community, and we have the opportunity to really move us forward into a better future. So thank you very much for allowing me to present this afternoon on Women of Color Beyond Belief. You may visit the YouTube channel for Black Nonbelievers to see the presentations from the Women of Color Beyond Belief conference, as well as some of our other events, some from our 5th anniversary, as well as some of our most recent events that we have hosted online. So please do take a look at the presentations. These were some of the wonderful speakers and organizers that were at, that were at the conference. There were many more people there. For our first event we had, there were about 100 of us there, which was just awesome. And I appreciate, again, everyone who supported, everyone who came, and everyone who listened. And as you can see, we love to put on, we get a little fancy. So, unapologetic about that. So, yes, thank you once again. And I hope to see you next year in Chicago, or wherever you may find Black Nonbelievers, whether it is in person or virtually.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandisa. That
Thank
was
you.
fantastic. Don't forget you're still sharing, and then we'll throw some questions out there. And I've got some thoughts I wanted to share as well. The while you were talking, I threw some links down in there, and I think the only one that you mentioned that I didn't grab, at least that I was thinking of, you may have others, was the YouTube link. So I've asked Jocelyn if she could put that down in there so folks can find your YouTube channel, since you referred to that. But check the chat, folks, for some links. And of course, feel free to Google all of this there. It's easy to find. And I really appreciate the focus on this today and this year. And I'm really happy that this conference became a reality. We learned about this when we invited Sakivu to Free Flow, and we were happy to hear about it and share it. And I will say that, in conference planning, when we're trying to come up with speakers, what we really struggle with is not going to the people that have been talking about stuff for the last 10 years. It's easy to do that, and it really bites into the subjects well. But I think what I really have appreciated about Secular Woman as well as American Humanists is they do a great job, and American Atheists as of late as well are doing a really good job of bringing in some speakers that are not just of interest, but also of something besides old white guys, right?
Yes.
And they all have something unique to add, and it is certainly a conflict with an event plan to ensure you are attracting a lot of people, right? Which those old white guys do, but you want to attract everybody and you want to interest everybody. And it doesn't have to be, 10 hours of philosophy and religion and atheism rules. There's a lot of good things coming out of humanism that don't come out of simple philosophy and atheism. So congratulations on a successful event. And I'm really glad it's got the steam to continue.
Thank you very much. And I absolutely appreciate all of the support that we get. And, it's interesting because over the years, while I am very happy that, I am very popular, I appreciate that. And I love that people love what I have to say, and that I don't just talk about, diversity and inclusion. Um, but one of the goals that I have as an activist is to make sure that I am not the only speaker. I am not the only one who is featured, because as a community, there are a number of people who have some really great really great work and really great things to offer. And so in doing that and really fostering that community, that has just become a part of, that's just become of a part of our dedication, myself and Sakibu and Bria's as well, because we have actually developed a really good working relationship. We have developed a sisterhood,
Hmm.
in this movement. And some of our approaches are different. Some of our subject matter is different, even though they may be somewhat similar. But it also shows that there's diversity even amongst what we do. So that has been really, really great.
Yeah, fantastic. And I can say that when we're looking for speakers, we look to conferences already, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to vet new talent at the level of like your conference. You want to make sure you're bringing in people that already have it together, at least can put a presentation together, even if they haven't done one at that level. And we do that as well. So we certainly pick on your and other conferences to feature speakers, and we appreciate having those videos out there so we can get a sneak peek at who they are and what they're going to talk about.
Absolutely.
Because everybody wants to talk, and not everybody wants to hear from everybody. You got to find the right
Right,
people.
right. Yeah.
So one comment from our YouTuber, Tanya Gibbs, said, "I had a wonderful time at Women of Color Beyond Belief conference. I'm so glad
Yay.
you I'm so glad
Yes.
you do what you do. Do you think this time the pandemic could be useful in building a foundation that would stand once it's over?" And I'm not sure exactly what she means there, but I'll let you and I can figure out that what she's talking about there.
So I think that with the pandemic and also with everything that's been taking place in the news, especially as we have seen these latest tragic rounds of police brutality and also calls for systemic change, I do think that now is a time for those who are dedicated and committed to supporting our organizations that amplify the voices of people of color. There has been a surge in support for us, which we appreciate, and we hope it continues. So that, and what we try to do is build that foundational base. We try to continue to provide community and be consistent with it, because there are still people who are looking for us, or they may not even realize that they're looking for us yet. And once they find us, it's really important for us to remain consistent, and hopefully we'll continue to generate that support so that we can continue to provide it.
Mhm.
So I think this year is really, really monumental in a number of ways. Many of us have been challenged by it, like a lot, but it has also provided some really, really good opportunities for us to really band together, to really reflect on our priorities and how we can help each other better. And so I think that this really is a good moment. No, not even just a moment, but it really is a good springboard for doing things for the future.
A point of change, right? It's an inflection
Yes.
point, and I think
Hmm.
that I'm really happy to see this. When I look back at the history of the fight for Black lives and the civil rights movement, um, I'm really pleased to be alive at this point to be able to see and experience it. So I think it's something that I think we'll all look back on, and not everything in 2020 we're going to look back on fondly, but I think we're going to look back on that. So one of the questions, you just touched on it, but I want you to expound a little bit. Has Black nonbelievers had any increase in membership due to the national awareness of Black Lives Matter?
There's been some. Black Lives Matter has always been a premise for our organization. Yes, there have been, because there are many people who are disillusioned with how the church has had the whole pray on it mentality. We're just going to try to handle things peacefully and let God handle it. There are a lot of people who are dissatisfied with that. And the one thing that we encourage is that people don't just take anything again on faith, or take a wait and see approach. Get involved in your local governments. Make your voices heard. Be a part of the change. But you're allowed to do so. You're allowed to be a part of this change as a non-believer, as an atheist, because people need to know that we exist. As we move forward and as times change, we're seeing a shift in the Black community in particular, especially among millennials and the younger generations. They're not subscribing to those old traditional beliefs anymore. And so now there really is a point of change. There is a lot that pertains to religious freedom, and especially in relation to white supremacy and injustice, that people are making. People are seeing that a lot of religious beliefs or even religious institutions, they're seeing their role in them. And so there are many people who are pushing back against that. And so, as we do have more people finding us, more organizations finding us, if for nothing else, to include our perspectives, to
Hmm.
include our honesty, because we try to be honest about about our perspectives and how we see things. So I do, yes, as a result of what's been happening and the call for Black lives, there has been increased interest in our organization. And we're very much looking forward to being a part of that.
So couple of kind of remedial topics. You and I have I've heard you talk about this for a long time, and I've engaged with people on this issue, but certainly not from the perspective of experiences. A Black person as a non-believer is a minority within a minority, significantly. Can you touch on that briefly for the folks that haven't caught up to that yet? Because I know that's a topic that we've heard you talk about a lot, but I want to make sure we touch on that briefly for people who don't quite understand why you need to have a BN. You know.
Oh, yes. So, um, as I've said previously, even though the rise of religious nuns, even though the number of religious nuns are rising, within the Black community, and this number may be lower now, but according to the latest Pew Research numbers, the Black population is still only at about 12% in this country, but yet almost 80% still identify as religious. Now, if you compare those numbers, that's still astronomically high. It does speak to the number of religious people and how much influence the church has on our community. And so it's challenging enough to be an atheist for any of us. But when you're a part of a community, and a marginalized community that has that has had the church a part as a strong influence for years, and it is tied so heavily into the identity of the community. It is it's almost like climbing. It's really like climbing this battle, because you're not only finding yourself coming to terms with your non-religious identity, you also find yourself being challenged as to your experiences of being Black. And there are and then also we're challenging the other systemic institutions, like racial injustice and the privilege of people who have never had to experience that. So and then when we talk about intersectional and how these things have affected us. Yes, to be someone who is Black and identify as atheist or humanist or secular, um, there are often extra added layers, i.e., extra added challenges to those identities, and also others, and so which can just make it extremely polarizing. So organizations like Black Nonbelievers exist so that other people will know first that there are Black folks who are atheists. you know, it is not represented by a white majority. There have always been Black folks who have questioned, who don't believe, and etc. But also, too, it's for those of us who, for those who need those spaces to where they don't have to explain any of that. You don't have to explain it to your Black religious community. You may not have to explain your Black identity to those white non-believers who may not understand that, who may think that we speak for everyone,
Right.
in the community. So there are a number of things that that we do unapologetically to show that yes, we are very much a part of the Black community, and we're actually growing. So yeah, we're not going anywhere.
Well, we're glad you're in Orlando, and I wanted to talk to you about local groups and the challenges and benefits and the comings and goings of those organizations. And if people are interested in supporting, perhaps a local organization where there is not a Black non-believers group or another group that is made for Black non-believers, what do you recommend they do with the infrastructure that is there, perhaps
Hmm.
not representative of Blacks in the community, or when there is none? What do you give for advice in that? Because Orlando's got a lot of groups going on, and we've had Black non-believers for several years, so that's not necessarily the place I'm thinking about. But if there's not a Black non-believers group, or if there's not an atheist group, what kind of advice do you give to Black folks who are looking to connect like that?
So I always recommend to at least join one secular group that is in your area. There's always at least one. Even if it isn't a Black non-believers, do find your local areas, because I just don't like to contend that all of the secular groups are unwelcoming, because most are. It's just that there may be some factors that there is some work that some of the secular groups need to do, as far as how they engage more people of color. But the way to do that is to get more involved and to see how open they are to to adjusting, and to see how, because I've known a few people who have gotten involved with different organizations, and they've become a part of boards. They've become a part of leadership. They started volunteering. As long as their mission aligns with your values, do get involved with them. Now, you may subscribe, for those, I didn't mention this earlier, but you may, please do subscribe and follow us on social media. We're on Facebook. We have a public page. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. And like I said before, we're on YouTube. So even if we aren't in your area and you can't physically meet with us, you can certainly engage us online. And this has been one of probably the better parts of the pandemic. Even though it's been challenging, we've also had the opportunity to engage each other virtually. And there have been many of us, I think we've been ahead of the curve on this, whereas some churches or religious institutions had to adjust. We've been kind of doing this for a while. And so I think it's important that even if there aren't any folks in your area, do try to engage your local groups, but also do find us. You'll find that you may have some folks in your area that you didn't realize were there before. And if there's an opportunity to either start an affiliate group there and maintain it, because that's a thing, or if you want to get involved with a local affiliate, if it's in your area, there's an opportunity to do that. And I am a huge advocate for actually getting in there and doing it. My moniker for the Women of Color Beyond Belief was execution, because I put these things together, and I absolutely advocate for people to, even if it may be scary, because it is, get involved as much as you can, even if you aren't on the front lines, even if you're just supporting, you're offering a supporting role. It is very important.
Yeah, and I think that you touched on something that I want to elaborate on, which is you may not see a lot of people of color in the local group, but you will see that change the more you go, the more people see you there. A person of color will encourage others to go there, and you will build up enough steam to have an affiliate of Black non-believers, and to have the groups that are there focus on the issues and be more welcoming to Black folks and others. And we've had a Latino group, and we've had a Black non-believers group, and we're happy that those are part of our free thought community. One of the things that I have struggled with as a local organizer is telling someone who I see at a tent, at a festival. I'm a white guy. We've got the Central Florida Free Thought Community tent, and we've got our volunteers there, and we certainly try to mix that group up as much as we can. So we're putting everybody out there to see everybody. But what I want to tell people is if I see someone who looks to me to be Black, or looks to me to be Latino, or I hear an accent, I feel guilty, but I try to get over it, because I think it's more important for me to say to them, we have these groups in the area I want you to know about, than it is for me to feel like I'm stepping over a boundary and saying, how are you identifying me, and why are you identifying me? It's hard to do that sometimes, but I think it's important. What's your thought on that? If you were to walk up to our table, and I
Hmm.
told you this, how would you feel about it 10, 15 years ago? And what do you recommend for people like me who are trying to make sure that they know about the other groups, that they're not just the group that's
Well, I
not
think
focused on a minority?
options are always good. I think there are a number of people in this community who think that, well, we should just all belong to one group. We should all just be one under all umbrella and be one big happy family. That's unrealistic. And as we come to understand the different communities and the various points of view, and also what other groups may have to offer. It's okay to belong to more than one. It's okay to say that, you know what, hey, I am, I am I am this person. I may not, be Black, but I know of this organization that offers more support for Black folks if you want it. So I encourage people to, if you're interested in my organization and their organization, I encourage you to do both. It is important that we are all multifaceted, that we are not one dimensional. And it's going to take for probably some older white atheists to understand that. It's like, hey, as much as you want people to be a part of your group, um, pointing folks or directing folks to other organizations will not take away from your organization. I think it does take away if you try to just keep them for yourself. And then showing that there are collaborative opportunities will also help as well. It
Yeah,
will help those people who are coming to your tables. The more they see you collaborating with with the other groups, the more they may want to get involved with more than one. And so,
yeah.
we want to be careful not to spread ourselves too thin, but doing as much as possible is good.
Absolutely. And you can donate small amounts to several groups, right? And you
Hmm.
can you
Yeah.
can you can participate and enjoy, and especially now we're zooming like every night of the week. You can participate in many different groups, and you can lean into ones that are more valuable to you, and the ones that you find more interesting. So a couple of questions have come in since we've been chatting here. We're getting up towards the end of the hour. Are you okay to go up over a couple of minutes, Mandisa? Are we
Yes.
gonna okay?
Yes.
We won't keep it for too long. So I'm going to read them straight out of here. How much is the queer community involved in your organization, and what are your thoughts on whether the Black church is actually more hostile to LGBTQ rights?
Yes. So I identify as pansexual. If you want to talk about how much the queer or the LGBTQ community is involved, most of our organizers, over half of our organizers, identify as LGBTQ or are queer. Even in our mission statement, we welcome all. We welcome all, regardless of sexuality, sexual identity, gender identity. So we are very, very pro LGBTQ. We have a lot of members who represent the LGBTQ community involved with Black nonbelievers. And we do not tolerate homophobia at all. Actually, in the beginning of when we got started, we had some folks who sadly we had to part ways with because I know as someone just joined our Facebook group, which was great. And the reason why we asked if it is understood that we are not a separatist organization is that we encourage inclusivity and that we are not an organization that is, we're not, we are pro-Black. We are not anti anything else. The only thing we may be anti is religion, but and even then we're support, we may have religious relatives whom we love and support, but the doctrine itself, we don't like. I know personally I don't like that. But yes, we are very pro LGBTQ. We are very much an advocate for the LGBTQ community, pro sexual liberation, pro reproductive rights, etc. So that's very, very important to us. And also women's empowerment. Absolutely. My thoughts on whether the Black church is more hostile to LGBTQ rights. I think in some religious circles that is changing. However, overall, the Black church still has a ways to go because there are a number of LGBTQ folks within the church. And while some of these churches have made them feel more welcome, the doctrine certainly hasn't changed. And there is a problem there. Now, I have come into contact with some religious folks who are from the civil rights era, and they feel like, well, um, there's no there's no difference, or they're not the same thing. The LGBTQ struggles are not, they're different from the civil rights struggles, which isn't true at all. Because interestingly enough, it was sad that Bayard Rustin, who was gay, who was one of Dr. Martin Luther King's advisors, was written out of history for a very long time, as to sanitize the civil rights movement. And so now that this information is coming more to light, now that it is coming more to light and that we are bringing it to the forefront, that there were more secularists involved with the civil rights movement than people were aware of before. Um, there is somewhat of a shift that's changing, and the Black church needs to be ready. That whether they're ready for it or not, it's coming. And those who are going to remain intolerant will find themselves irrelevant in the near future. So it's like, for those who are still holding on to that, it would be sad that they are, but it's definitely more subliminal. Unfortunately, the church has a history of knowing certain things go on, but they sweep it under the rug. And this is how a lot of problems were allowed to continue, but that just can't happen anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I have friends that are black clergy, and I have friends that are white clergy. And I work with them on local interfaith efforts, and I have yet to pick the brains of the black clergy quite as much as I have the white clergy, because those in the black clergy are newer to me, as we kind of regroup in the Interfaith Council of Central Florida. But I suspect that with the amount of overlap with the Democratic Party, and with the amount of overlap in civil rights happening in the black church that doesn't happen in the white church, it's a different conflagration of events this year and in the last 10 or 15 or 20 years, with LGBT community asserting their rights. So it's an interesting dynamic, and certainly you layer on top of that religion and atheism, and it's it's
It can
it's
be a
deep.
tough it can be a tough call sometimes, but these
Yep.
are the conversations that we need to have, and hopefully we'll find some common ground, because
Yeah.
and it takes for us to speak up. I know you've done the invocations down there in Florida, David, and I know there's probably been some backlash, but it's interesting to see how the more we continue to do this, the more consistent we remain, the allies that we do gain.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
because as we as we do find our common ground on our human rights and the rights that we want for everyone,
Hmm.
it becomes sometimes it becomes easier for people to see that we're not much different. There's a lot that we have in common, with the exception of certain beliefs and certain values. But the more we can work on what we have in common than what we don't, we all win.
That's right. You lead with what you have in common. You don't lead with the disagreements unless you're
Right.
looking for a fight. One of my friends, locally a rabbi, has said, we have irreconcilable differences when it comes to the interfaith work that we do, but we put all of those aside when we come together to work on these issues. And that's true for all the organizations that are allies and activists on the same issues. So, a question I got privately here: we've had a banner couple of years of women of color winning elections. Do you try connecting with these elected women?
We have tried to connect with elected officials. Sadly, there are still a number of women of color who are overly religious, and so we have to kind of tread carefully. But we do try to connect. I mean, if you have, we definitely have over the years tried to connect with them. As a matter of fact, I met one recent locally here in the state of Georgia, who was very pro reparations, very pro LGBTQ rights, and I told her about my organization, and she seemed very interested in engaging us. And so yeah, we try to connect with as many locally elected officials, especially Black women or women of color, as possible.
Yeah, yeah, and you've got that national place to come from where you can connect with everybody around the country. We've been very fortunate to connect with people, secularists, atheists, agnostics in Florida. So I think that's where you get your power and you share your power, is
Yes.
by connecting with people that you can help and they can help you. It sounds transactional, but it's more than that. It's so much
Yes.
more than that. But there's benefits to connecting with those people. And that question, by the way, came from Jody Rogers off of YouTube, and it was messaged to me privately in Zoom here. So another question is, And you might have touched on this, but since it just came in, I want to make sure we refresh it. Has the Black Nonbelievers been part of the Black Lives Matter rallies? Have they been able to table or have been a part of it actively? Any of your
Um,
local groups, maybe?
some have in some cities. I know our Charlotte organizer, Tina Marshall, was very much a part of the Black Lives Matter in Charlotte. Now, one thing I must say about the Black Lives Matter organization is that it is pretty fractured. It is not one complete national organization. In fact, it was revealed that a Black Lives Matter Foundation was run by some conservative white guy out of California. So you really have to be careful about who, you have to vet the organization locally. I know in Houston, there's a Black Lives Matter group there. And so, yeah, some of our members do. The one thing I'm very, very cautious of is trying to co-opt any other organization in their mission, because we still have, we still have members who are still looking for that support when they leave religion.
Mhm.
And as while we do discuss the issues of racial injustice, and especially how Christianity in particular has played its part in that, we definitely and we encourage people to get as active as possible. We try to make sure that we keep our mission definitely support and advocacy based for our fellow atheists and non-believers, but that yes, Black lives definitely matter, and that as much as possible we get involved in conjunction with.
Yeah. And I think that something to keep in mind, and I'm learning a lot about this year, and I have more to learn. So if I goof any of this up in the next couple of seconds, please let me know, Mandisa. But Black Lives Matter is a cry and a rally call and a hashtag and so much more right now than an organization. And there
Absolutely.
are other organizations out there as well. So I would encourage people to get to know not just the hashtag or the rally cry, but the organization and the people behind it. And it's something that's happened locally here in Oviedo, where we live. Black Lives Matter has gotten a bad name, and I'm not. It's not my fight and my organization, but I want to make sure I understand why, where that
Hmm.
comes from, and to dispel that with good information, and find out where that comes from, and push back against it, and share the right information with people so they can understand that there's more to it than just a hashtag or a rally cry.
Absolutely. It's about also learning about, the institutional and the history of racial injustice in this country, and why we are saying Black Lives Matter,
Mhm.
and how they haven't, and how our lives have been dispensable for so long. And it doesn't mean that the Black community isn't working internally on ourselves. There are so many people who, they make the wrong comparisons, or they make false comparisons as to Black Lives Matter. But it really is about understanding the root of it, the history,
Mhm.
and why this has been a cry for so long. When you learn about the institutional factors, when you learn about the economic injustice factors, all of it plays a part. And so it definitely is more than just about a hashtag. And I do become concerned when something does just become a hashtag, because also saying Black Lives Matter doesn't necessarily mean you think Black Lives Matter.
Right.
It becomes a part of what we do every day to
Mhm.
show that.
That's right. That's right. You have to respond, even when you're not called out by name to respond. You have to be proactive, and I found myself doing that in my family, and less in my friends groups as I've become more of a
Yeah.
secularist, but in my family for sure. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to give you a chance to put in a last plug if you like, and I can pop something into the chat if you got a link. Anything you want to take us out with before we go?
Absolutely. So thank you all once again. Jocelyn shared the YouTube link for our channel, where you can find the Women of Color Beyond Belief presentations. Please do consider making your donations to Black Nonbelievers. We are a 501c3 organization, so donations are tax deductible. I appreciate the folks who made purchases online. I will be getting on that shortly. I handle those personally, so I get the notifications, and I mail them out. So once again, again, I appreciate you there. Also, we are also on Cash App for those of you who are familiar with that. You may type in Black Nonbelievers if you're on Cash App. You can support us that way as well. Again, we are on Instagram, Be Nonbelievers Inc. We're on Twitter at Be Nonbelievers. The B and the N are capitalized. And on Facebook, anywhere you find us on social media. So once again, thank you very much. And support your local organizations wherever you are.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks so much for being here, Mandisa. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you.
So we truly miss all of you, and we hope we can get back together again soon, but only when we can do so safely. Just a quick reminder, please join us in 2 weeks as Paul Halpern talks about his newest book, Synchronicity, the Epic Quest to Understand the Quantum Nature of Cause and Effect. Remember, you can find us on Facebook, on Meetup, on YouTube, and keep in touch however you're able. We are everywhere at CFL Free Thought on the web, Facebook, Meetup, YouTube, CFL Free Thought. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep a mask on it when you have to go outside. Thanks, everybody.